Famed poet Emily Dickinson has been brought back to life in the eponymous new Apple TV Plus series that turns what we think we know about her on its head. I'm Rob Lucuria, Senior Editor here at Bell Derby with cinematographer Tim Orr. Tim, this is not your run-of-the-mill biopic or bio story about a famous literary feminist icon, is it?
No, not at all. Emily Dickinson's story's been told, several times, in film, especially. And, this take on it, when I, first read it, I could, certainly tell this was definitely different. And, I think it's not your typical, it's not masterpiece theater. It's a bit bolder, and it's kind of got that, it's got like a modern edge to it, which is something that Alena Smith, the show runner, creator, and David Gordon Green, who directed the first two episodes, definitely wanted to kind of bring to it, really make it feel youthful and alive, and kind of give insight to Emily's world, in a way, her young life, something that really hasn't been touched on as much in other film projects.
Yeah, like when you take on a project that is going to be period, of course there are certain things that you're taking into account when you're preparing, but this one was so different because, as you say, it's very modern in its look and tone in certain respects. So how did that inform your work on the show and your preparation for kind of getting those particular touches right?
It's like one of the things that this show, it in some of the other crafts that extends to cinematography, it wanted to be grounded in a certain amount of realism in terms of having it feel authentic to the period, through, the production design and costume design especially. And I felt like that within the lighting of the show, I wanted that to feel grounded in realism also. That said, a lot of the style would be kind of more camera based in terms of the way we use camera movement. Particularly early on in the show, it's there's some aggressive camera in terms of use of zooms. So we really wanted to kind of push the envelope in that regard, and have it feel really cinematic, and within the color, beyond the lighting, it's it's slightly kind of pushed to become something that is vivid and alive.
Yeah, the period obviously didn't have a lot of bright lighting at night, and so you're either filming during the day or you're filming with candlelight or that kind of aesthetic. And that's, I don't know, because I'm not a DP, I have no idea actually, but I'm wondering how challenging is that to get right when you need to obviously light scenes properly so that the audience can see what the hell's going on?
Yeah, so the challenge with this show is that it is really only, in terms of lighting, it's really only two looks, really. It's natural daylight, of course, for the day exteriors, and for the day interiors, it's mainly all window light, and then it's candles and lanterns and fire for any of the night scenes. And so I definitely wanted it to feel realistic and sumptuous and beautiful, not overlit. I certainly approach this, even though it's a bit of a comedy, I certainly approach it more as a drama. And, it's thankfully with, today's digital cameras, they are very sensitive. And although there are a few scenes that I could shoot with just the natural firelight, most everything else is augmented. And the trick becomes making it feel, realistic to the period in terms of what it would really look like if you were kind of in a dining room that's got a fire and candles, but making it also kind of adhere to fit into the tone of the show, the kind of show that it is. So, it becomes a bit tricky in terms of maintaining the proper levels and making it feel, getting, like the color of the fire, matching that, with the lights that we're, the modern movie lights that we're using. But, you kind of adapt to it, and like I would keep trying to kind of push the envelope in terms of when the mood of the scene was, appropriate, to kind of go a little darker as long as you can, see what's going on.
Yeah, and I'm really taken with the scenes that Haley Steinfeld and Wiz Khalifa share in the carriage and in this imaginatory fantasy-like world that she inhabits. To me, it's like a Sleepy Hollow, austere kind of gothic. It's really, really beautiful to look at. What were the inspirations, or what were your particular challenges for bringing that part of the series to life? Because it's really quite striking.
Well, that's the one of the things. It's like Emily throughout the show, she has it's kind of glimpses of her imagination, and everything in the death carriage sequences you're speaking of, and she has some kind of imaginations and hallucinations along the way throughout the show. With the death carriage sequences, that definitely wanted to feel heightened, and so that was where it's like we can kind of step outside of realism and give it a little bit more kind of theatrical, kind of like truly heightened nature. Like so we would introduce I'd introduce haze, smoke, and to make it kind of feel like, kind of foggy, misty, mystical. Certainly it's like I even stray with the way, Emily's lit in the night exterior, to where it's a little bit more portrait-like. And in the carriage itself, it's certainly, it's kind of like, when someone like Wiz Khalifa is playing death, you got to have fun with that. Right, and his carriage itself is so opulent and sexy. Wanted to really piggyback on with that in the lighting and make it feel like, hey, this is a place you want to hang out.
Yeah, I'm actually really a sucker for beautiful cinematography. A lot of us are. A lot of us who don't necessarily understand the science behind it and certain parts of the technical aspects of cinematography look at it as just an art form, right? And a lot of Dickinson, to me, was very painterly. There's images where you've got Emily in the foreground, and she's very dark with this beautifully lit background. You've got like branches. There's one scene with an eclipse that I was so struck by. That beautiful stuff that you were doing is, to me, a highlight. Is that a highlight for you, to really just go crazy, go nuts, and really throw as much as you can onto the screen as possible to kind of give the audience something really exciting to experience?
Oh, certainly. One of the things about like any art form is that I think you can perform it best when you're inspired. And there were so many instances within the stories we were telling that really kind of offered that inspiration. And when I would get something, when I would read something, it's like, oh wow, an eclipse. That's going to be difficult. But you take it on as a challenge, and that's one of the things that I think that we can all do our best work when you are challenged, and you have to figure out a way to photograph it, to light it, to get the work done, but do it in a way that tells the story, and hopefully, through your inspiration, also inspires the audience to want to learn more about Emily Dickinson, or want to do something creative, themselves. I think that that's where the best work comes from, and it's certainly something that, it's why I like doing what I do. I love lighting, I love camera, and it's whenever you find these projects that are special in that way, it's just a gift to be able to, to be a part of it.
How much do the other crafts within a series or movie impact your work? For example, are you conscious of what the color palette of the costumes and sets are? Are you conscious of the music or what the music might be or the script? Like, how difficult is your job? Because you're kind of like during production, you're not necessarily seeing a lot of stuff that happens in post. And how difficult is that to make sure that you're kind of aligned with the look and feel of the show?
It is integral. It is something that if you, I mean, because this is, one of the beautiful things about filmmaking is it's a collaborative art form, and I work really closely with the production designer and the set decorator and the costume designer, but especially the production designer early on in prep in terms of working together about, to decide what's the, like, for instance, in Dickinson, there's a lot of kind of like wild wallpaper, kind of psychedelic, and it extends to some of the carpet, and like the Victorian area, the Victorian era was like really kind of wild, especially with people of means. And so, we would, we'd work with them on what would be complementary to the lighting, the type of lighting that would be done on the set, how that works with, say, the plans, the overall plans, general plans for, what the costume designer brings to the table in terms of a color or pattern, because you don't want that, to clash too much. And even though it's like you can, a lot of the times you'd think that like the production designer and costume designer may work a little closer together because they want their work to, feel cohesive. The same thing goes for the cinematographer, because, the cinematographer is the one that's actually lighting and photographing the sets that are built and the costumes that the actors inhabit. So knowing that we are all on the same page is tremendously important. And we really, certainly that's the case with Dickinson. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to come back to do a second season of the show, because it was just, a joy to work on. And, everyone was really great at their job. And so it made it fun.
So speaking more generally now, what do you consider as, you've been working for decades, what do you consider to be really amazing cinematography, either generally or a specific example, like in the past, and you just thought, that is perfection in my particular field?
That's a good question. It's like perfection, I think, is a very kind of like I could throw out a few kind of like, like DPs that are like truly great. They've done beautiful work over the years. Roger Deakins especially. I mean, he's always excellent in virtually everything he does. Chivo Emmanuel Lubezki is fantastic. Robert Richardson, he does amazing work in his own style, in his own way. There's many people. To me, it's like I always gravitate more towards when realism is done very well. And that's why I was always a really big fan of Harris Savides, because he could do realism beautifully well, and in a way that it was challenging, because a lot of the times as a cinematographer, you may be afraid to maybe go too dark in a certain scene, or where it's, of taking certain chances. But it's just like the cinematographers and the cinematography that I always admire are the ones that really have taken the biggest chances. And, again, it goes back to inspiration. That inspires me, because I can tell that the cinematographer and the filmmakers were inspired.
Yeah, I'm glad that you raised Harris Savides. His work on Zodiac, for example, is exactly what I think you're saying, that realism. So special, that work. I was also wondering, before we wrap up, But apart from the shots and the looks that we've already talked about, is there anything at all that you can pinpoint as what you're most proud of from your work on season 1 of Dickinson?
There's a couple of things, honestly. I feel like that I was very proud of the more fantastic work, that we kind of touched on a little bit earlier with, the death's carriage sequences, and any of those kind of like, scenes where Emily would, encounter death, because they were, for one thing, they were slightly askew from the general look of the rest of the show, which I was, always, thrilled to do. It's really great to be able to, to light those sets and, candlelight is, it's beautiful, right? But like, I like that we landed in a place with the lighting that felt cohesive to the show, but it also kind of, was a bit trippy. And it kind of pushed the idea of having something feel more contemporary, and youthful, which is one of the things that like we were really going for, and it's like, and when you kind of think, it's like, oh, what's the music cue going to be, like in this sequence. Having it feel like something that like really kind of goes together. And so that, and then I was also, very pleased with the eclipse sequence, because that was very difficult to achieve. And so whenever you do something, it's just like, God, how am I going to do this? And you pull it off, it's very satisfying.
Yeah, I can imagine. Actually, I'm going to ask you one more question and then I'm going to let you go. I noticed a lot of your credits, you've worked with David Gordon Green, who also directed a couple of episodes of the show. What is it about him that you guys continually seem to be collaborating? What is it about his aesthetic or the way he works that you really enjoy?
Well, David and I have known each other a long time. And when we first started working together, it was the type thing that it was just became kind of very easy in a way, because I kind of knew what he was thinking, because we would really kind of have a lot of the same instincts and the same taste, so it was like we could speak a shorthand like right away. And I think it's worked well because, you're there as as whether it be a production designer, costume designer, editor, DP, to support the director and, help them tell the story. And so it was really something that we were always simpatico on virtually everything, and we would inspire each other, like with kind of like some crazy ideas here and there. And it's just something you kind of, there's a reason why certain people work together often, often it's, like out of friendship, and then it's not only friendship, but it's kind of like a really great creative partnership, which we've definitely had over the years.
Well, Tim, we're looking forward to seeing more of your amazing work on season 2, and thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Everybody go to goldderby.com right now, make your predictions, stay home, and watch all of our great contenders chats, and make sure you click subscribe as well.